Exposing the deep state and government overreach. You're with Pella Neroth-Taylor on today's News Talk, The Pulse.
Welcome to the Pella Neroth-Taylor Show. Well, Trump has surprised and astonished and impressed and disappointed or whatever the world once again. We're living in a rolling TV reality show, it seems. And I was looking at the headlines this morning in the Daily Telegraph, London's most conservative and actually most Trump newspaper, and I saw a picture of a grave-faced looking Starmer surrounded by his lieutenants with the Union Jack behind them. I thought, now the British really are going to send troops into Ukraine and World War III will start. But no, it's not World War III with the Russians, but it's a trade war with a leader who's almost becoming as unpopular in certain intellectual circles in Britain and Europe as Vladimir Putin. That is, of course, Donald Trump. So just reading out here, we've got Britain plots retaliatory war headlines. Britain plots retaliatory tariffs against Trump. Wall Street slumps when it opens. Starmer. Britain entering a new era on trade. The dollar crumbles as Trump tariffs trigger confidence crisis. Well. With us to try and interpret what's really going on behind the headlines as well and give us a more analytical interpretation of what's going on is Martin Armstrong, who is a top economist. He's the founder of Armstrong Economics, a global solution, and Princeton Economics International. He's testified before Congress and was called in when creating the G5 in 1985. He's later called in again by the Presidential Brady Commission to help with the 1987 crash, and called in by the European Commission when crafting the euro, no less. Even in 1996, when he testified before the House Ways and Means Committee on the dollar and the global economy, he had the equivalent of 50% of the new U.S. national debt under contract. So we'll be talking about the U.S. debt as well. Welcome to the show, Martin.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So, I mean, these tariffs, what do they include? I mean, just give us a sort of a brief rundown of what they are, what they mean, and then whether Trump has done a masterstroke or whether it's catastrophic, and who it's going to be catastrophic. Is it an own goal, or is he just doing down his competitors? And will it be helping the American worker?
Tariffs are basically a throwback to Marxism and protecting jobs and this sort of thing. But it ignores really one of the more classic economic theories of comparative advantage of David Ricardo. In other words, you shouldn't be trying to grow a head of lettuce in Saudi Arabia that you're going to have to keep watering, cost you $10 when you can buy it for 50 cents from somebody else. But all these governments have gotten involved in protectionism, still coming out of World War II. Trump put in a 20% on Europe because Europe tends to be much more still in line with these ideas of tariffs and protecting jobs. You take Canada, people are finally waking up that every province considers itself to be like a government, a independent state, and they all have tariffs against each other. So I've heard from a lot of Canadians saying, we should probably thank Trump because we didn't even know about this.
Wow. Okay.
But it is, unfortunately, Trump, I think, is acting out of what we were all taught in economics class back in the 60s, and 70s, that, you put on tariffs to protect jobs, etc. He's correct in that before the income tax, the federal government basically was fully funded by tariffs. But we also didn't have all the social programs. You were talking about a minimal level of government to begin with. So, yes, that's historically correct, but it would not function in today's environment. I mean, the cost of government is way too big to be funded by tariffs.
I'm just going to ask you about those 19th century developments, because America, I mean, he harkens back to that great era. McKinley is one of his favorite presidents. A lot of us are thumbing our encyclopedias to find out who McKinley actually was, but we'll talk about that in a minute. I'll just summarize what's going on. The tariffs include a 10% rate on all imports, with even higher rates for major trading partners. It's 20% for Europe, for instance,
right,
but 10% for the UK. So things like Italian coffee, Japanese whiskey, and Italian sportswear become more expensive. China faces 54% tariffs on its exports to the US. The UK has said is mulling its response, while Ursula von der Leyen, the EU leader, has said that they're doing the same if EU talks with the US fail. Stocks dropped and investors turned to bonds and gold for safety, while the Fitch ratings noted that these are the highest tariffs in over 100 years. Now, Trump seems to admire McKinley, as you said. He was protecting McKinley was protecting the infant American industries against the sort of British Empire, right? And basically allowing them to grow so that the British wouldn't outcompete them. And that was one of the causes of the war between the states, or the Civil War, because the American North wanted protectionism and the American South didn't, because they were exporting their cotton to the British Empire. But doesn't that make sense? I mean, it's that to protect you protect a child, from the vicissitudes of the world, you nurture them and you protect them and then you let them out. Didn't Imperial Germany have tariffs from the British Empire as well, and they grew into a giant? So isn't the logic behind tariffs quite a good one? I mean, can we at least give that to Trump?
Yes, but I think it's gotten a bit out of hand in that the global economy has grown like a child, and it has evolved. When McKinley was dealing it, we were just really in the infancy of the Industrial Revolution. And a lot of people, didn't quite understand how things were happening. They created the Sherman Antitrust Act because you had all these small railroads and they were being bought up and put together as one, which was more efficient. But, you reduced employment, and so there were two sides to every coin. And I think that we were at that point in time, we were still in the growing stages of international trade, and also in the development of the Industrial Revolution. Britain had, they passed a red flag law where somebody, because the horse and buggy people didn't like these automobiles, and somebody had to walk before them with a horn and a flag saying an automobile's coming. So that kind of really hurt Britain and shifted a lot of the industrial development to Germany and the United States. So you have what I guess lobbyists in a certain industry that never want innovation. The economist Joseph Schumpeter basically called it it's a wave of creative destruction. So you create the automobile, it destroys the horse and buggy industry. So can you really use protectionism to prevent that from happening? Well, then you create stagflation,
right?
And that's what the problem with Russia was.
Right. So just to say, so basically, I mean, there's two ways of looking at tariffs. One is to protect your infant industry so they can grow and become big and then outcompete because I mean, Britain was always pro free trade as long as they were the dominant economic actor. And then there's the other argument, which is if you close up your borders to developments, you'll stagnate, as I said, and then you won't innovate, and eventually you'll never catch up with the open markets people, open borders people. So that's an interesting counter argument there. That's what you're saying. And you're saying that Russia stagnated. Yeah. When did Russia stagnate?
Well, that's the problem with communism, why it failed. That it basically tried to make everybody the same. And in doing so, you're suppressing human nature. And it's human nature that Einstein said it's curiosity that leads to all innovation. If you're not curious, you'll never discover something. And that was really the problem of communism. And I mean, I was called in 1997, the Asian currency crisis by China. And it was, I went because I wanted to go see the Great Wall, etc. But, they took me to a facility and they were monitoring absolutely everything, but they were not interfering. There were 249 varieties of tea. But I could see why communism failed. They were like, well, why is this one tea selling for like $1 here, but $5 there? I said, well, where does it come from? I was here. I said, well, first you have transportation costs. And they were like, oh, okay. And then somebody will pay more for this tea if they like it better than this one. So I was basically having to explain human nature. But I mean, I could see why communism failed, because if that tea was $1 here and it cost you $10 to get it to the other place, but still sell it for $1, that was the inefficiency. So this idea of equality for all sounds nice, but that only applies to rights.
Do you think that Trump, I mean, he's obviously satisfying his MAGA base, people in Ohio, J.D. Vance's home state, they're high on fentanyl. They don't have any jobs, especially young men, don't have any meaning. They want manufacturing jobs to compete with China. And they don't believe that this financialized, Anglo-Saxon economic model works now in a multipolar world, because who's going to, Britain and the US are losing centrality as brokerage points, and people can transact their business in Dubai or via the internet or whatever. Anyway, do you think that that desire to satisfy his MAGA crowd won't be more important than the loss of innovation that you talked about just now that happened with China, and which you think will happen to the United States if it carries on this tariff route?
Well, I think the issue is that what Trump is doing is what we were all taught in school back then.
Right.
So it's not something that he has dreamed up by himself.
Right.
I was taught that back in high school in the 60s too.
Okay. So you mean he's a man of his generation? Are you of Trump's generation as well?
Yes,
right,
I would say that's probably more the problem. I think, basically Schumpeter's correct. It's a wave of creative destruction. And we shouldn't be trying to create manufacturing jobs when the next generation is software, intelligence, and technology. It's kind of like still dealing with the horse and buggy people. Right. There are things that are changing, and we shouldn't be trying to go backwards in time. We should be looking at things, much more practical. And tariffs, fine, you're looking at supporting a job. But in reality, if that guy's getting, 20 pounds an hour and you can get it for somebody that's willing to do it for $5, then the society is paying for that. It's not just that guy's making 20. So I think we have to be a little bit more practical in this, because there are two sides to every coin. And as you raise the tariffs, fine, you might protect jobs, but you lower the standard of living for everybody else as well.
Okay, well, I'm going to throw in a counter argument. I'm not an economist, but what I've often thought about is the way that we actually spend most of our days at work, right? And we have a couple of hours of leisure at home. And the idea is to make our work as meaningful and interesting and a focus of our identity as possible, because that's the way it is. We'll be talking about that after the break. Welcome back to the Pella Taylor Show. We're talking about Trump's tariffs, and we've got Martin Armstrong as a leading economist with us, and you were a Trump skeptic there. That's okay. Just what I was just saying before the break there was, I said it, I've always thought that consumer goods are pretty cheap anyway these days, and most people are just drowned. Even the poorest of us. I mean, poverty is a relative thing. We're not. It's not like poverty 20 or 30 years ago. And of course, people today, even the poorest, are living in a lifestyle that's unimaginable to the aristocrats of 150 years ago or something. Mm-hmm. So why don't we just lower the standards of living we have when we're free, and make our work lives both more meaningful and more interesting, and all the rest of it, even if there is an economic hit to it. So I'm talking about psychology and well-being rather than just money and endless profit.
Well, I mean, that varies from country to country with part of the culture. For example, Mexicans coming into the United States, they're some of the hardest workers you ever saw. That's part of their culture. Then you take somebody from, Guatemala, and it's not the same. Mm. I saw that in Germany when the wall came down. People thought, oh, okay, they're German, so they'll work just as hard. And I knew people that set up plants there, and he says it takes 3 Easterners to equal 1 West. I said, they've never been raised that way. Mm. They were under communism is like, we need somebody to sweep that floor here. You're next in line, Yeah. Yeah. So to enjoy what you do, if you do that, you will do it better than if you're just told to do it. Hmm. You have to enjoy what you do. I mean, that's what innovation's really all about. Mm-hmm. And some people just work just to get the money, and they don't care what it is. Others want to enjoy it. I mean, we're not all the same.
I'm veering off a little bit, but that's okay. We're taking into a different direction. I mean, Musk said the other day, one of the biggest problems of the 21st century is finding meaning in life through work, and what we're going to do, especially, I guess, when AI comes on stream, and it might upset everything. I mean, I've been reading successive articles in the last couple of days that the law firms are dead because AI can do contracts. Doctors are dead because their AI can read X-rays. Journalism is dead because AI writes better articles than most journalists, and all the rest of it. Anyway, I don't want to go into AI because that's going to last us for the rest of this hour, and we've only got 24 minutes. But I just want to say this. I mean, I think that I believe in autonomy, and as you said, I mean, when you're told to do something, you don't have a stake in it. Then we cheat. We cheat our employers, and that's what happened throughout communism. People were the biggest skivers in the world, and I've lived out in that part of the world, and they didn't believe in work at all. You pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work. What was the slogan? But what I'm saying is, don't you think that, let's say, for these young men who can't get wives and play internet games all day long between taking fentanyl hits or whatever, I mean, isn't it worth taking an economic hit so that we can't buy all this cheap stuff from China and boost Walmart's profit, so that these men can get to work in a factory or whatever it is Trump is trying to reshore to America?
Well, the other problem that Trump, I think, is overlooking, and I had testified before the House Ways and Means Committee on this. They had asked why no American company got any of the contracts to build the Yellow River Dam in China. I said, very simple. The United States taxes worldwide income. Europe did not. So a German company bidding on the same project was already 35% cheaper. All right. So the point was that these companies, if you left, and what Trump is not really looking at, if you allocate trade according to the flag the company flies, the U.S. has a trade surplus. It's just they've moved offshore, mainly for taxes, not because I'm going to pay this guy $8 versus $10 over there.
Right.
I was restructuring companies from Japan that wanted to get into Europe. I put all the manufacturers into Britain, and I got to know Maggie Thatcher at the time, and she asked me why I was doing that. And I said, very simple, that all the regulations and social programs, etc., required in Germany made the cost of labor 40% more than Britain. Now, the average worker didn't see anything different. It was all the regulations on top of it. And if Trump were to, really look at this more objectively and look at the taxes. When I testified there, I said if we lower the tax to 15%, end worldwide taxation, they will all come back. I mean, that's what I was doing, restructuring companies. So I knew why they moved. And
so remove the worldwide taxation duty on Americans, and then reduce the local U.S. income tax to 15%. That's your solution
for the companies, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, then they will come back.
Right.
All right. When the problem with the Democrats and the socialists, they think it's an endless pot. For example, Seattle, the city, just put in a head tax on all labor. And they thought, oh, it's going to raise $400 million. Instead of reforming, it's how much more can we get? And they just had to announce that they were short almost $50 million because people left. You have California putting on all these taxes. It's the number one state people are leaving. Instead of saying, gee, why are they leaving? Oh, let's punish them for doing so.
Right.
You have to look at this. What governments do not do is they don't look at us the same way as a manufacturer. If I raise this price, I'm going to sell less. All right. They don't look at taxes that way. Oh, I need more money, so get it from them. Rather than reform. I mean, there's so much inefficiency in all governments around the world, federal, state, local, you name it, because there's no real supervision.
But isn't two thoughts? We got 2 minutes left, but you could take either or both questions. One is, so basically, Trump is got a blunt instrument at his disposal, because what you're saying is like a micromanagement of all the state legislation, which he probably might not even be able to do. But you're saying, first of all, isn't Doge the other hand of these reforms, and how successful will that be? And secondly, just to be clear, these reduced taxes would bring back American labor as well as the American companies that are currently abroad.
Yes. I mean, most of what companies have left various jurisdictions for, you take Macedonia, they were offering 25 years of a guarantee, we will not raise your tax. That brought a lot of companies in. It's like, okay, fine, the tax can be 10% today. It might be 25% tomorrow. There has to be some sort of coherent economic strategy with governments don't think that they have to apply to. And it doesn't matter who you're talking about. Doge is exposing what you're seeing at the federal level. I mean, we could certainly use that at the state and local levels as well. But, some of the things is, funding transgender opera in Colombia. I mean, what is that all about? They just seem to be endless. I've dealt with governments for, 50 years, and I can tell you USAID was always known as the slush fund in Washington. That was just, common knowledge. So, Trump actually doing something about it has shocked the world, but, everybody in Washington knew that's what it was.
Martin, if I could just ask you a final question. Trump is known as an impatient guy, and he's also flexible and fast moving, and he wants movement, and do you think these tariffs are a kind of exploratory move, and he'll rescind them if it doesn't work and try something else? Because you can just magic it away. It's not like building things, it's an instant decision, and an instant decision can be rescinded. And then he'll try something else, or he'll get the political coverage or political license to do something else if this fails.
Well, look, most like putting the 20% on Europe is mostly for negotiation, to force them to not retaliate with more tariffs, but to say, hey, look, okay, fine, let's negotiate this out. That's what his style really is. Okay. And you can tell 10%, that's a tariff. You go above 10%, that's political.
Right. Okay.
So, I mean, you have to look at this that way. He's trying to get that, but there's another whole level that's not even being discussed, and that's quality controls. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the EU can say, well, no agriculture if it's grown with a fossil fuel based, fertilizer that we're outlawing. So then they can just outlaw that product from coming in. Forget tariffs. So that's another layer to it.
It's a sort of secret tariff in a way.
Yes.
Yeah, right. And Europe's very good at that. And they're very good at holding the high moral ground. And I think Trump might feel a psychological resentment against this looking down on their noses, Europeans trying to dictate the world.
Well, it's a very complex problem. And for example, even in Canada, you find the farmers in Quebec have a 250% tariff on American agriculture to protect their jobs. So, I mean, every little nook and cranny's got something, going on. That I understand what Trump is trying to do. He's trying to actually create more free trade by negotiation. But whether that will
that's
be
interesting
or not.
He's playing another level game. He's trying to create free trade through negotiation. So actually, all this McKinley stuff that we've been talking about and dreaming about the 1960s or the 1860s is not actually quite the truth. He's actually a bit of a liberal in a way.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, what clearly after World War II, Europe went in with all the socialistic Marxist type things to protect jobs. We're starting over. Okay, understood. But they've grown accustomed to it and have expanded it. So he's right. But that's why he put 20% on Europe versus 10% on UK.
Yeah, so there's two games. One is to negotiate over to the 10%, and then the 10% is the tariffs, which we've discussed earlier. It's a true tariff game. So he's actually got a double game in play there, and we'll be watching that closely. Well, thank you very much, Martin Armstrong. Incredibly interesting, and I feel we've only tapped the very surface of this very interesting topic, which you've explained so well. So the Pell and Taylor Show on the Pulse. Thank you very much.